Eilean Haley is a veteran of the women's liberation movement of the 1970s, a retired public servant, a translator, Spanish to English, a poet, an aspiring novelist, and a quilter. She lives on unceded Wongal country in the inner west of Sydney. Eilean, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Here we go, share. Okay, so my topic tonight is Get the Men Out, and it's about protests by women prisoners against the presence of men in women's jails. So thank you, Janet, for hosting this, and good evening, everybody. This is a picture of Laverne Cox playing Sophia in Orange is the New Black. Friendly, cooperative, even-tempered, an asset to the inmate community of Litchfield Penitentiary. He's the jail hairdresser, as you can see, and no trouble to anybody. Who'd want to get rid of him? This portrayal has been massively influential, I reckon, in shaping public attitudes to the subject of men who say they're women in women's prisons. I don't know about you, but most of my attempts on Facebook or whatever to talk about men in women's prisons fall on deaf ears or are met with the cyberspace equivalent of a shoulder shrug. At some point I composed this little ditty that goes to the tune of Cell Block Tango. Okay, all right, trigger warning, I'm about to sing. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And if it does, it doesn't matter. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. And if it does, who are you to say it's wrong? Okay, I'm not going to sing again. Okay, you'll be happy to know. Right. So in the course of these kind of conversations, there was a bloke who said to me, it may well be that women prisoners don't normally see it as a big problem and can deal with it, just as other bullies or male guards, they turn their backs on them or bash them. Well, that was it. That started me off on a search for instances where women prisoners did see it as a big problem, as a problem big enough for them to protest or object in some way. First of all, let me clarify that what I'm dealing with here is what prisoners and former prisoners have done or said. Not human rights advocates, not prison staff or former prison staff. Splendid and important as the testimonies and work of such people have been, what I'm interested in is what women prisoners had to say and what they've done. And let me also say at this point that there is a distinct possibility, more than a distinct possibility, that women prisoners' discontent with the presence of men who say they're women is far more widespread than has been manifest in the form of overt protests. The main inhibiting factor is fear of retaliation or punishment by either the men or the prison authorities or both. And this is a well-founded fear, as we shall see. I've divided women prisoners' protests up into 4 different kinds: direct action, speaking out, lobbying, and lawsuits. So I'll start off with direct action, by which I mean women prisoners who simply do not comply with the TWA mantra, who won't accept that trans women are women, who refuse to go along with the deceit and delusion, who don't stand for the cognitive dissonance that this whole regime of gender ideology promotes, and who, what's the other term? Yeah, won't put up with gaslighting. Okay. And I'll start with a homegrown example from my own town of Sydney, Australia, which is a former penal colony, just by the way, Sydney. Yep. Now, in 2019, women prisoners at the Mary Wade Women's Correctional Centre got into fights with Evie Amati, a man who says he's a lesbian, who went on an axe rampage after he tried to date a lesbian and she fled from him. One such fight, at least at the Mary Wade, was occasioned by a woman telling Amati he should be in a male prison. Then we have the case of Janie Southerly, a prisoner at HMP Greenock in Scotland. Miss Southerly used the pronouns he and him of a fellow prisoner, a man who says he's a woman, and referred to the man as a tranny. He accused her of transphobic harassment over a 4-year period, 2019 to 2023, and she faced a criminal trial. That's a criminal trial, not a civil trial, okay? Now, the trial resulted in a not proven verdict earlier this month, but meanwhile, while the process was in train, Ms. Southerly came up for what should have been an opportunity to move to an open unit. Some reports describe this as parole, but due to the criminal action against her, she lost that opportunity and spent more than 2 additional years in jail. So note the punishment Ms. Southerly endured for objecting from both the man and the prison authorities and Scotland's prosecution service. Jamie Alley, who is a prisoner at Shakopee Prison in Minnesota, USA, provides an example of a different kind of direct action by women prisoners, the boycott. She has withdrawn, she told Alpha News this month, from every single one of my classes because there are transgenders in them and it's very traumatic. That's her direct words. Another boycott example from Canada. In Canada, the women's prison system provides group-based psychological programs designed to heal childhood sexual trauma. However, these programs are open to male inmates who say they're women, including those with convictions for sexual offences or violent offences involving women and children. The human rights organisation CAUSEBAR reports that women prisoners avoid these programs if such men are present in the groups. Note that such programs are supposed to facilitate rehabilitation, and accordingly, the presence of the men is undermining a prime objective of the whole correction system, as well as depriving the women themselves of a beneficial experience. And this might be a good place for a pause to note that most women prisoners, in fact, the overwhelming majority of women prisoners everywhere, have been the victims of male physical and/or sexual violence prior to entering prison, often during their childhood or adolescence. In addition, poverty, neglect, drugs, mental health issues, a childhood in the care system, self-harm and suicide attempts are all common components of women's prisoners' life stories. And so we can say that the female prisoner population, accordingly, is a highly traumatised population. So at this point, we could go on to the second form of protest or objection that I've identified, which is what I've called speaking out. That is, providing oral or written testimonies from within prisons. This form of protest depends for its efficacy upon collaboration with outside advocates who've got the wherewithal to publish the testimonies and or read them out publicly at protests. This is an example from Canada. letters smuggled out of prisons by women's rights advocates in 2021-2022 and published on the website Gender Dissent. And this is an example from the USA, a protest at the state capitol in New Jersey in 2023, at which testimonies were read out from prisoners in the state's women's prison. The cops are there to keep at bay the usual group of baying trans extremists. Okay. Prisoners have also given oral testimony through phone calls to people outside, which, if they're recorded, can then be made into podcasts, or otherwise they're quoted in written articles, for example, by the pro-woman media platform Redux. The speaking out process requires a good deal of trust on the part of prisoners. They will mostly want or need to use an alias or remain anonymous. In some cases, they don't even want to reveal what prison they're in. The fear of retaliation or punishment looms large here. The speaking out process is often facilitated by former prisoners who've maintained friendships and sisterly solidarity with women inside. This is one such woman, Amy Ichikawa, who was imprisoned in California. Others include Rebecca Warmbo, Minnesota, USA, and Heather Mason of Canada. Now, we'll go on to the third kind of process, lobbying. By lobbying, I mean putting the case before legislators, government officials, or other influential bodies. I'll start again with an Australian example. In 2022, prisoners at the Dame Phyllis Frost Centre, Melbourne, sent a petition to the Victorian Minister for Corrections, Corrections Victoria, and the Ombudsman, asking for the removal of a man who says he's a woman called Lisa Jones. The prisoners were concerned for their safety, they said, as Jones has a working penis and a history of violent sexual assault. And they said that they were initially told the inmate, that is Lisa Jones, would be locked down 23 hours a day, but that ultimately administration aimed for a full living, working and socialisation integration. The petition did not succeed. The man remained at the Dame Phyllis Frost and further men were later sent there. Canada provides an interesting example of lobbying in that the lobbying effort was directed towards a mainstream, well-heeled prisoner advocacy outfit rather than towards pollies or bureaucrats. In 2021, 22 former prisoners signed an open letter to the Canadian Association of Elizabeth Fry Societies, CAEFS, which is, of course, named after the renowned 19th century prison reformer. I thought it might be nice to put a picture of her into this, okay, because she's large, she's widely accredited with the idea of single spaces for women in prisons, yeah? Okay. And now the CAEFS makes all the right noises in terms of women's rights and so on, but the former prisoners who signed that open letter accused CAEFS of having repeatedly silenced criminalised women's reports, questions and input when they challenged CAEFS's transgender position, a position that was decided on, so the signatories say, by a large majority of women without experiences of criminalisation. And in that open letter from 2021, the signatories urged CAEFS to join a call for an investigation into the issue of men in women's prisons. As far as I know, CAEFS has yet to do anything of the kind, and I don't think that they will be doing anything of that kind anytime soon. CAEFS receives funding from two government departments, Public Safety Canada and Women and Gender Equity Canada, and given the official situation in Canada, as it's commonly known, CAEFS would presumably be risking their government funding if they did anything that looked even remotely against gender ideology. And they'd lose their government funding, and of course they wouldn't want to do that. So onwards now to the fourth kind of protest, lawsuits. The action by women at the FMC Carswell, Fort Worth, Texas, USA, has got to be one of the first, if not the first, lawsuit ever filed by prisoners against the presence of men who say they're women in a women's jail. It dates from 2016. This is Rhonda Fleming, one of the plaintiffs in that case. She and two other prisoners filed a motion in December 2016 seeking to have FMC Carswell included in a temporary injunction issued earlier by a district judge that blocked the Obama administration, which was then in its final days, from enforcing a directive which allowed public school students to choose a bathroom based on gender identity. They followed this up in February 2017 with a suit against the Bureau of Prisons for allowing men who say they're women to be placed in female prisons. They named Obama, the Democratic National Committee, and several former Obama cabinet members as respondents. The case was dismissed. Rhonda Fleming has brought or sought to bring a number of other suits since then, the most recent being one against the Tallahassee FCI in Florida, in which she argued violation of her constitutional right to bodily privacy. That's Amendment 4 of the US Constitution. The case went to trial in Tallahassee in January 2025. It was the first case to do so, and this was seen as something of a victory, but it too was lost. And just to pause here to say I'm unaware of any lawsuit challenging the presence of men in women's prisons that has been won. If anybody hears of any, please let me know. Meanwhile, male prisoners who were denied allocation to the women's estate have been winning lawsuits against prison authorities. I haven't quantified this phenomenon, but one recent case was here in New South Wales when Melissa Yarnold reached a confidential settlement with New South Wales Corrective Services and Police late last year. But back to actions by women's prisoners. In California, prisoner Tomiyekia Johnson, that's her in the pic, and 5 others are bringing a case against the Secretary of the Californian Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. The case seeks the overturn of a Californian state law, SB 132, which facilitates the housing of men who say they're women in the women's estate. The suit claims the law violates the 1st, 8th and 14th Amendments to the US Constitution. The case has been ongoing since 2021, so it's been ongoing for 4 years at this time without getting anywhere near reaching a resolution. One reason for that it's taken so long and got nowhere, is the persistent opposition to it mounted by the very prestigious ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union. The ACLU petitioned the court to be added as party to the case, so in representation of men who say they're women who want to continue to be allowed to be put in women's jails, and the ACLU is now seeking to have the case dismissed altogether. Now, however good the ACLU might be on other issues, and I would agree that they are, and they have been, and they have a wonderful history, the ACLU is proving itself to, well, it's blotting its copybook. It's hardly a friend to women's prisoners, I would say. Janie Southerly, the Scottish prisoner I mentioned earlier, is now suing the prison service over its failure to provide single-sex spaces at HMP Greenock. There was a previous attempt to sue the prison service in the UK, mounted by FDJ, a former prisoner, in 2021. And we might pause here to note the anonymity the claimant resorted to in that case. The judge in that case said his job in relation to the policy of letting men who say they're women into women's jails was to decide whether the policy was lawful, not whether it was desirable. He ruled inadmissible a variety of evidence of the harms to women caused by the policy and found the policy to be lawful. The outcome for Ms. Southerly may be different, given the recent finding by the Supreme Court about the meaning of the term woman in the UK Equality Act. Also, it's been hinted that J.K. Rowling will be financing the suit through her newly set up Fighting Fund. I will end on that hopeful note. To conclude, women prisoners do not in general feel comfortable with men who say they're women in women's prisons, nor do they feel they can deal with the presence of such men with confidence and ease. There are a growing number of expressions of disquiet, objection, and rebellion. Mainstream prisoner advocacy organisations, such as CAEFS, and orthodox human rights organisations, such as the American Civil Liberties Union, have been unresponsive to this upsurge due to their allegiance to gender identity ideology. New networks are developing in the vacuum thus created. These new networks are made up of prisoners, former prisoners, and advocates for women's sex-based rights. Okay, that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you. That was really fantastic. I knew about a couple of those, but I had no idea there was so much opposition to the men with rapid onset sentencing dysphoria. So thank you so much. That was really wonderful. I look forward to your update in a little while.